At 5 o'clock, Beth Arlen's supper bell used to bring every hungry miner in Alder Spur to her porch. On the morning Orrin Hakes stole it in front of the whole camp, he was not just taking iron. He was telling every man there, eat at Bates' table and lose your wood, your flour, your credit, and maybe your job before dark. The worst part was not that the men believed him. It was that they were hungry enough to pretend they did. Years later, when men in Alder Spur tried to explain why the company mess went empty that winter, they still began with the bell. It had hung above Bates' porch for 6 years, black iron with a cracked lip and a rope worn smooth by floury hands. When she pulled it twice, miners came down from the gulch with coal dust in their brows, hungry enough to forgive hard benches and chipped plates. That morning, Bates stood in the doorway with both sleeves rolled to the elbow and bread dough drying on her wrists. His clerk, Davy Pell, put one boot on Bates' rail, lifted a screwdriver, and began to work the screws from the bell bracket. "Leave it," Bates said. Davy's hand stopped. Orrin Hakes stood in the street below with a company ledger tucked beneath one arm. He wore a beaver hat too fine for a mining camp and a red wool scarf that made his pale face look colder. Behind him, a dozen men had gathered between the assay office and the company store. Some were miners, some were teamsters. One was Clara Venn, who had taken coffee at Bates' back table every Sunday for 4 years. Clara's eyes met Bates', then Clara looked at the ground. Hakes smiled as if the whole camp had just behaved sensibly. "No outside meal bell on company ground," he said. Bates wiped one hand on her apron. "This porch is mine. The bell is mine. The men who eat here are not company mules." "They are company labor," Hakes said, "and company labor has been warned against your table." He turned his voice so the street could hear every word. 3 men emptied their guts after eating near your stove. Until the camp knows what poison you served them, I will not have my payroll eating your danger and charging me for the sickness. One miner looked down at his boots. Clara's mouth tightened, then shut. Davy's screwdriver slipped once against the bracket. Bates knew the shape of the warning. 3 miners had taken sick after eating at the company mess 2 nights before. Cramps, fever, and vomiting so hard the night watch heard them from the bunkhouse. By morning, Hake had blamed Bates' kitchen. By noon, he had told every man paid in company script that anyone eating at her table would lose credit at the store. Bates knew it. Half the camp knew it. Knowing was a weak thing when Hake held their wages in paper and their flour in sacks behind his counter. Davy removed the last screw. The bell dropped into his hands with a dull iron sound. Bates stepped forward. Hake lifted one finger. 2 store guards shifted near the porch steps. They carried no badges. They needed none. A man with another man's food behind him could stand like law. "You will get that back," Hake said, "when the camp can trust what comes out of your stove." Bates looked past him to Clara. "You carried coffee from here to Sela's pike when he was coughing blood last spring. Did it poison him?" Clara's face tightened. Her husband worked below Hake's number 3 shaft. Her wash money came through the company office. Fear stood between the women like a third person. "I do not know what happened," Clara said. "It was a small lie. Small lies did not stay small in hungry towns." Davy carried the bell down the steps. Hake took it from him and tucked it under one arm like a stolen dinner pail. 5 o'clock will be quiet tonight," he said. Bates felt every man in the street waiting to see whether she would shout, cry, or beg. She did none of those things. Her bread dough was rising behind her. Men could abandon a table, but dough still needed shaping. "Then men will have to remember they are hungry without help," she said. Hake's smile thinned. "Pride is poor soup, Mrs. Arlen. So is rotten beef." The watching men shifted. Someone coughed. Davy Pell looked at the bell in Hake's arm as if it had grown heavier. Hake's pale eyes hardened. "Careful." Bates held his gaze. "I have been careful since before you learned to sell bad flour by the pound." For a moment, it looked as if he might order the guards up the steps. Then he turned away because a public roughness would have made him look smaller than the bell made him feel. "No man on company credit eats here," he called. "No company wood comes to this stove. No mule team hauls for this kitchen. Anyone who crosses that porch can settle his account before dark. That was the blow, not the bell. The wood. The night before, Bate had only 3 armloads stacked behind the kitchen, 1 hot stove, 1 evening of bread if she burned carefully. Flour paid only through Friday unless Hake could move Friday with his mouth. The freight road had frozen hard. Snow held in the high timber. Without wood, her stove would go cold. Without a stove, her boarding table was only a room with plates. Davy left the empty bracket hanging above Bate's porch. 2 screw holes showed black in the wood. Bate stood under them until the street cleared. Then she went inside and punched down the bread. Bate shaped the dough into loaves. Her hands moved from habit. Press, fold, turn. Press, fold, turn. Grief could wait its turn when bread was rising. By noon, the first order failed. A boy from the store came with an empty handcart and eyes fixed on Bate's threshold. "Mr. Hake says no wood delivery." "I heard him say it," Bate answered. The boy swallowed. "He says your flour account is closed too." "My flour is paid through Friday." "He says Friday moved." She looked at the boy. He was no more than 16, all wrists and ears, but old enough to be afraid for his place. "What is your name?" "Emmett." "Emmett, did those sick men eat here the night before they took ill?" The boy's face went white. From the store porch across the street, Davy Pell watched with one hand on a flour sack. Bate did not raise her voice. "I am not asking you to testify. I am asking whether you can say one true thing to yourself while standing on my porch." Emmett looked toward Davy. Then he looked at Bate's hands, still dusted white from dough. "No, ma'am," he whispered. "They ate company beef." Davy stepped off the store porch. Emmett backed down Bate's steps so fast he nearly tripped. "Go on," Bate said, "before truth costs you more than you meant to spend." The boy ran with the empty handcart rattling behind him. Bate closed the door. At 3 o'clock, Rowan Pike came down the freight road with 6 mules and a wagon stacked with green-sawn boards. He was the last hauler who still used the North Pass after early snow. Men called him stubborn when they needed him and foolish when they did not. He was broad through the shoulders, dark-haired, and weathered from years of wind cutting the same lines into his face. He had a habit of looking at a thing fully before speaking, which made impatient men call him slow. Bate saw him stop in the street where the bell should have rung. Rowan looked at the empty bracket, then at the quiet porch, then at the company store where Hake stood behind the front window. Bate opened the door before he could knock. "If you came to tell me you cannot unload," she said, "save the apology. It will go cold with everything else." Rowan took off his hat. "I came to ask where you want the boards." That surprised her enough to make her angry. "You heard Hake." "I heard him from the far bend. He carries well when he wants a camp to admire him." "He will cut your company freight." "Likely." "That is not small." "No." Bate studied him. "Why?" she asked. He glanced again at the empty bracket. "My brother died in the No. 2 drift 2 winters ago. The company charged his blanket against his last pay. You fed the men who carried him out. No one rang a bell for that either." Bate remembered Silas Pike. She remembered his cough, his laugh, the way he always took the chair nearest the door because he did not like feeling trapped. She remembered Rowan standing outside her kitchen after the burial with his hat in both hands, unable to step in. "That does not buy me a wagon," she said. "No, it buys me the right to decide what my team hauls." Across the street, Hake came out of the company store. Bate folded her arms. "Unload at the back, then. If you mean to make trouble, do not block my front door while doing it." "Yes, ma'am." He drove around to the alley. Hake reached him before the first board came down. Bate stood on the back step with a dish towel in her hand because it was better than standing empty. "Pike," Hake called, "that load is for the timber shed." Rowan loosened a rope. "This stack is mine until it is signed over." "Your winter freight is mine after sundown, if you unload 1 board here." Rowan looked at his mules. The lead animal stamped once, impatient with men's talking. "Then you will need another winter hauler." Hake laughed. In this pass before snow, you think highly of your own absence. I think enough of it. Hake stepped closer. You have a note due at the store. Harness, oats, axle grease, I can call it by supper. There it was. Bates saw the hook catch. Rowan's jaw tightened, but he did not look at her. That mattered. He did not make his cost her burden to soften. Call it, he said. Hake's voice dropped. For her. Rowan finally looked at Bate. Not for permission, not for rescue, just to let her see he knew what he was choosing. For my brother, he said, and for a table that never charged a dead man's blanket. Bate had to turn away first. He unloaded the boards by the kitchen wall, not enough for a winter, enough to repair the loose back step and board the draft gap beneath the stove room. When he finished, he stacked 3 armloads of split wood beside the door, wood he had brought under his wagon seat for his own camp. I can pay for the wood, Bates said. I know. I mean now. I know that too. Then name it. Rowan set the last stick on the pile. Supper when you have supper to sell. That sounds like credit. It is hunger postponed, different thing. Bate did not smile. She wanted to, that made her more cautious. You eat at the back table, she said, same as any man who comes. Good. No special plate. Never trusted a special plate. That did make her smile just once before she shut the door. Inside, she set 6 plates because hope was not always foolish. She left the chairs upright. She put stew on the stove and bread under a cloth. At 5:10, no one came. Boots passed the front window twice and did not slow. Once, Bate heard a man cough outside her door, then the scrape of his heel turning away toward the company mess. Empty chairs were bad enough. Chairs emptied by fear made a louder sound. At 5:30, Rowan Pike opened the back door and stood on the threshold with his hat in one hand. Am I early or late? He asked. You are alone. That was not one of the choices. Bate ladled stew into a bowl. It became one. He paid with a silver $50, more than the meal was worth. Bate pushed the extra back across the table. I am not a collection plate. Nor am I buying forgiveness for being the first coward to arrive after dark. Coward? He looked toward the empty chairs. A man can haul wood in daylight and still choose the back door at supper. Bate left the coin where it lay between them. Sit then, since you have named yourself properly. He sat at the back table. She did not sit with him. Rowan ate slowly, not because the stew was bad, but because he seemed to understand that finishing would make the room empty again. When he left, he set the bowl in the wash pan and said, It was good. It usually is. Yes. After he went out, Bate found Clara Vinn's blue coffee cup on the shelf by the stove. Clara had left it there Sunday. Bate had washed it and set it back, expecting Clara's hand to claim it next time. Now the cup looked like a question with no good answer. Bate took it down, wrapped it in a cloth, and put it in the pantry. By the second day, Hake's pressure changed shape. No one came to breakfast. 2 miners walked past Bate's porch and did not look at the empty bracket. At noon, Davy Pell arrived with a printed notice and a hammer. Bate opened the door before he could nail it. Do not put company paper on my house. Davy held the notice awkwardly. It says all food sellers must buy through the company store. It says Orrin Hake learned to print his wishes. Davy's face reddened. It is an order. From whom? From the company office. The company office is Hake's desk with a better lamp. He looked behind him. Hake was not in the street, but his window had eyes. Bate took the notice from Davy's hand. He let her because he had not expected resistance that did not shout. She read the first lines. All boarding tables, cook stalls, and private meal sellers serving company laborers must purchase supplies through the company commissary. Unsafe food vendors would be denied street trade. Unsafe. There was the new word. Bate folded the notice once and handed it back. Tell him if he wants to call me unsafe. He can come say it while looking at my stove. Davy lifted the hammer again. Bate put her hand flat against the doorframe where the nail would go. You will hit my hand first. Davy froze. Across the street, Hake stepped out of the store. Nail it. Davy looked at Bates' fingers. They were work fingers, red at the knuckles, flour in the lines, burned scars near the wrist. He could have struck. Hake would have approved. The camp might have pretended it was only paper. He lowered the hammer. Across the street, a miner waiting near the store window saw it happen. So did Emmett, with both hands buried in his apron. Neither spoke, but the camp had just watched Hake's own clerk fail to drive a lie through Beth Arlen's hand. Hake's face changed. Beth took her hand down. "Thank you, Davy." The boyish clerk looked miserable. "I did not do it for you." "I know, you did it because you still know the difference. That is enough for today." Hake crossed the street himself, took the hammer, and drove the nail through the notice so hard the window beside the door rattled. Bates stood close enough to feel the movement in the wood. "You will not shame me into losing money," Hake said under his breath. "No," Bates answered. "You are doing that without help." He leaned close. "The sick men will say what I need them to say." "Will they?" "If they like having medicine on credit." He went back to the store, leaving the notice crooked on her frame. Bate did not tear it down. Not yet. She let the camp see it. Let them read unsafe while smelling bread through the cracks. Let the lie stand where every man who believed it had to pass. That afternoon, Rowan came with a flour sack over one shoulder. "Bought it at Pritchard's," he said. 8 miles south, cost double." "I did not ask you." "I know." "Then why bring it?" "Because I had a team and you had a stove." "That is not an answer, that is a balance sheet." He set the sack just inside the kitchen, careful not to step farther without invitation. "I am better at those." Bate looked at the flour. It was good flour, not company gray. It could keep her going 3 days, maybe 4 if she thinned the biscuits. 3 days, 4 if she lied to the dough. Bate hated that she counted it before she thanked him. "Hake will close your note for this," she said. "He already did." And Davy Pell came to my wagon with a paper saying, "My freight string is suspended from company loads." "You should have kept the flour." "I did keep it from him." Her anger rose because she had nowhere else to put fear. "Do not stand in my kitchen making ruin sound clean." Rowan took the words quietly. "It is not clean. My mules need feed. My winter root may be gone. I may have to sell 2 animals before spring." That stopped her. He went on, still plain. "I am not giving you a story where no one pays. I am telling you the price so it does not turn into a debt you did not agree to." Bate pressed both hands against the table. She had been ready for pride, pity, and the sort of tenderness that tells a woman to hush while men arrange her life. She was less ready for a man who named the cost and left it where it belonged. "I can buy the flour," she said, "when you sell supper. If no one comes." Then I bought expensive mule feed for a woman too stubborn to eat it. She laughed once, startled by herself. The laugh changed the kitchen, only for a breath but enough. Rowan looked at the crooked notice by the front door. "Are you leaving it there?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because if I tear it down, Hake gets to say I feared the words. If I leave it, every hungry man has to decide whether paper knows more than his own mouth." Rowan nodded. "That is a hard way." "Most straight ways are." He lifted his hat. "If you need more wood, I know where a deadfall sits above the old charcoal pit." "I know where it sits too." "Then I will meet you there with an axe, unless you prefer to freeze independently." She should have refused. The safer path was to hoard what wood she had, keep quiet, and wait for Hake to get bored. But Hake did not get bored with control. He got hungry for it. "Dawn," she said, "and I swing my own axe." "I would be disappointed if you did not." The deadfall lay above the old charcoal pit where lodgepole pines had burned years before and left black ribs in the soil. Morning came hard and blue. Bate wore 2 shawls, her oldest boots, and wool gloves patched at the palms. Rowan brought 2 axes, a hand sled, and coffee in a dented pot. They worked without much talk. Bate's first swings bit poorly. Rowan did not correct her by taking the axe. He showed her on his own log, then stepped back. By the time the sun cleared the ridge, her shoulders burned, chips clung to her skirt, and the warmth between them had almost made the hill feel separate from Hake. Then Bate stopped swinging. Clara looked thinner than she had 2 days before. Her bonnet strings hung loose. She carried a sack of beans, not large but heavy enough that she had shifted it from one arm to the other many times on the climb. "I brought these," Clara said. Bate rested the axe head on the snow-crusted ground. "Why?" "Because they were yours, in a manner of speaking. I took 2 pounds from your pantry last week for the church supper and meant to pay." "You meant to pay before or after you let Hake take my bell?" Clara flinched. Rowan turned away and busied himself with the sled, giving the women room without leaving Bate alone. "I was afraid," Clara said. "Yes. Jonas's shift is all we have. Hake can cut him." "Yes. If I spoke, he would have done it." Bate picked up a split length of wood and placed it on the sled. "Then say that. Say you chose Jonas's shift over my name. Do not hide it under fear, as if fear has no hands." Clara's mouth trembled. "I chose Jonas's shift over your name." The words did not fix the thing. They did make it stand where it could be seen. "What will Hake do when he learns you came here?" Bate asked. "He already knows. He stopped me at the store. Said if I walked up this road, the company laundry tubs were no longer mine." Bate looked at the beans. "And you came?" "I came late." "Yes." Clara swallowed hard. "I cannot make yesterday right. I can lose what I was protecting. That is all I have." Bate wanted to forgive her because forgiveness would make the cold less crowded. But a woman could be kind too soon and teach people that harm only needed a tear to be finished. "Bring the beans to the kitchen," Bate said. "Not as apology, as work. You help cook tonight if anyone comes." Clara nodded. "And if no one does?" "Then we eat beans and learn the size of the room." Clara carried the sack down while Bate and Rowan loaded the sled. At the lower bend, they saw smoke rising too thick from the company mess. Then the mine whistle screamed. Once, twice, 3 times, not the shift call. Trouble. Rowan dropped the sled rope and ran. Bate followed with the axe still in her hand. A stove had burst in the company mess. Not an explosion big enough to level walls, but enough to blow the door from one hinge and fill the room with smoke and panic. Men stumbled out coughing. One cook had burns along his sleeve, and 2 miners dragged another man across the threshold, retching from smoke. Hake stood near the store porch shouting orders that crossed each other. "Get water. Move those barrels. Keep them back. No one leaves the yard." The mess kitchen was his pride because it fed men through scrip and kept them from spending coin at Bates' tables. Now smoke poured from its windows, and every hungry man in Alder Spur stared at the broken door. Bates saw the danger before Hake did. A coal oil can lay near the stove, dented, leaking dark around its seam. "Move the oil," she shouted. No one moved. Bate ran in low, one shawl pulled over her mouth. Rowan caught the door with both hands before it could fall inward, heat shoved at her face. She grabbed the oil can by its handle. It burned through her glove. She carried it out and set it in the snow, where it hissed and steamed. The burned cook stared at the can and then at Hake. Davy, halfway across the yard with a water bucket, stopped long enough to see it too. The thing Hake called safety had been leaking beside his own stove. "Get that man to my kitchen," she told Rowan, pointing at the miner on the ground. "Not the bunkhouse, my kitchen, now." Hake spun toward her. No company labor goes into that house." Bate was still coughing. Her eyes watered so badly she could barely see him. "Then feed them smoke," she said. Rowan and 2 miners lifted the injured man. Hake stepped into their path. "Anyone who crosses to her table loses store credit." The injured man coughed so hard his whole body bent. One of the carriers said, "He needs air." Hake did not look down at Abel. "He needs order." The men holding him stopped. Bate understood then that the story would not turn on proof. No paper would save them. No official would arrive. The whole camp stood on the thin board between fear and decency, and Hake was counting on fear to weigh more. She walked up to the men carrying the injured miner. "His name is Abel Kern," she said. "He likes extra pepper and cheats at checkers. He has eaten at my table for 5 years and still owes me 12 cents from April. If he dies on this street while you decide whether Orrin Hake owns your hands, I will remember each man who let go." Abel's eyes opened a slit. Smoke tears ran through the coal dust on his face. One of the carriers tightened his grip. "I am not letting go," he said. The other nodded. Hake grabbed the first man's sleeve. "You will when I say." Bate lifted the axe she still held from the deadfall. She did not raise it like a weapon. She held it by the head and put the handle between Hake's hand and the miner's sleeve. "Take your hand off him." The street went quiet except for coughing and the crackle inside the mess. Hake stared at the axe handle. "You threatening me?" "No, I am stopping you." "There is a difference." Rowan stepped close but not in front of her. His voice was low. "Move, Hake." "You are finished here, Pike." "I was finished yesterday. That makes today simple." Hake looked at the men watching. Any man who carries company labor into that woman's kitchen signs away credit until spring. Bate turned toward the yard, smoke tearing at her throat. "My stove is hot," she said. "My door is open. I will not ask who has scrip. I will not ask who was silent. But I will not ring a bell for men who know where food is and wait for permission to be human." Then she stepped aside. The two carriers moved, not fast, not grandly. They simply carried Abel Kern past Hake and across Bates' threshold. That was the first break, not a crowd cheering, not justice. A body carried where Hake had said it could not go. Inside Bates' kitchen, Clara had already cleared the long table. She looked once at Abel, once at Bates' smoke-blackened face, and reached for clean cloths. "Water on the stove," Bates said. "Already there." The answer was small, practical, and worth more than sorry. For the next hour, the kitchen stopped being a business and became a place with work to do. Rowan hauled water. Clara cut away Abel's scorched sleeve without fuss. Bate made onion poultice for the smoke cough. Men came to the back door carrying the burned cook, then 2 boys with singed eyebrows, then 3 miners shaking from cold after standing outside in wet shirts. Bate fed them broth because broth was what she had. She tore bread into cups. She put men who had abandoned her the day before on benches and did not ask them to earn mercy with speeches. Hake came once to the back door and saw 6 company men inside. "This does not change the order," he said. Bate was wrapping her burned palm in a wet cloth. The skin throbbed, her throat hurt. She had soot on her cheek and flour on her skirt. She was too tired to be afraid in the usual way. "No," she said. "It changes the men." His eyes moved over the room, counting faces, measuring who might still obey. "You cannot feed the camp," he said. "You do not have supplies." "Then I will feed who comes until the pot is empty." "And when it is?" Bate looked at the men listening. "Then we will all know exactly what your warning was worth." Hake left. By dusk, the pot was nearly empty. The company mess still smoked. Hake had the burned stove dragged outside, but the kitchen would not cook before morning. Snow began falling in hard little grains that clicked against the windows. Bate stood in the pantry with Clara, counting what remained: half a sack of flour, beans, onions, a heel of salt pork, coffee enough for 1 strong pot or 2 weak lies. "It will not feed them," Clara said. "No." "Hake knows." "Yes. He will offer food from the store if they sign against you." Bate closed the flour bin. "Then he will be himself in front of everyone." Clara's face tightened. "Bate." "What?" "I'm afraid again." Bate looked at her. "So am I." "Does it get easier after you choose?" "No, but it gets harder to lie." Rowan came in with snow on his shoulders. "Hake is stacking store flour on the mess porch. He has Davy writing names. Men get ration tickets if they agree not to eat here after tonight." Bate wiped her burned hand carefully. Pain flared up her arm. "Of course he is. He is also telling them, you started the stove burst by crowding his cook." Clara made a sound of disbelief. Bate did not. Hake's lies had grown bold because no one had made them expensive enough. How many believe him? She asked. Rowan shook his head. Hard to say. Hungry men listen with their stomachs first. Bate looked at the dining room. Men sat shoulder to shoulder, coughing over cups of broth. Some would leave. Some would sign. She could not stop hunger by being right. Then Abel Kern pushed himself upright from the bench. I can speak, he rasped. Bate turned. You can sit down before you fall down. I saw the oil can by the stove. Saw him store it there last week because he did not want to pay shed space. Abel coughed and pressed a cloth to his mouth. I can tell them. A day earlier Bate might have reached for that. A witness, a truth, a clean answer, but Abel was pale beneath the soot, and the story did not need another man dragged upright to do what others should already know. No, she said. Abel blinked. No. You will not stand in snow, half-joked, so men can wait for proof before they act decent. Rowan watched her carefully. Bate lifted her burned hand, then lowered it because the room had already seen enough. This is not a court. Hake did not take my bell because he believed my food was unsafe. He took it because men came when I called. If they need a sick man to prove they are hungry and free, then they are not ready for my table. Silence moved through the room. It was not comfortable silence. Good, comfort had done poor work in Alder Spur. Clara looked at Bate in a way she had not looked in years, not grateful, not guilty, awake. What do you want done? Clara asked. Bate looked toward the company porch where Hake's lanterns were being lit one by one. Nothing yet. Rowan frowned. He is taking names now. Let him. Bate, by morning he may own every man's breakfast. He already tried to own their supper. Then what are you waiting for? She looked at him. He was not challenging her to take his way. He was afraid she might stand still until the thing crushed her. That fear had a right to speak once. I am waiting to see who comes without a bell, she said. Rowan's face changed. He understood before he liked it. That may cost you everything. It already has a good start. He nodded slowly. Then I will wait too. Do not wait, work. At what? Your mules. If men choose Hake, you will need them to leave. If they choose here, we will need wood. Either way, standing in my doorway looking loyal does not split a stick. For the first time since the bell came down, Rowan laughed. It was quiet, rough, and brief. Yes, ma'am. He went out. Bate spent the next hour doing the most frightening things she could imagine. She cooked without knowing for whom. Clara worked beside her. No speeches, no tears. She cut onions, rinsed cups, and tore bandages from one of her own petticoats for the burned cook. When Hake's boy came to the back door and told Clara her laundry tubs had been emptied into the snow, Clara closed her eyes once. Then she opened them and handed Bate a stack of bowls. Where do these go? Bate pointed to the sideboard. There. That was Clara's cost. Not enough to erase yesterday. Enough to begin telling the truth with her hands. At 7 o'clock, Hake came into the street carrying Bate's supper bell. He had polished it. The cracked lip caught lantern light. He held it high enough for every man near the mess porch to see. Bate watched from her dining room window. That is mine, Clara said. Bate did not correct her. For that moment, everyone in the room had a claim on what had been taken. Hake set the bell on a crate outside the company mess. Davy Pell stood beside him with a list, an ink bottle, and a row of tin ration tokens laid out like coins for obedient men. Behind them, sacks of flour and beans were stacked under a canvas sheet. Lanterns made the whole thing look official because Hake understood that hungry men often mistook arrangement for law. Men of Alder Spur, Hake called. The company will feed its own tonight. Sign here, take a ration token, and keep your winter credit. No man will go hungry because one woman chooses spite over safety. The word safety made Bate's burned hand curl. Inside Bate's dining room, the burned cook heard it and looked down at his bandaged arm. Hake lifted the bell by its handle and struck it once with a stove poker. The sound was wrong. Bate knew her bell's voice. It should have been cracked and warm, a little rough at the edge. In Hake's hand it sounded flat, like iron dropped on stone, not supper, command. Men moved toward the crate. Bates' stomach turned. Rowan stood across the street by his mule team, one hand on the lead harness. He could have blocked the way. He did not. His cost had been named. His loyalty had been proven. This choice was not his to force. The first miner stepped up to Davy. Davy dipped the pen. The miner looked at the ration token on the crate. Then he looked across the street at Bates' house. The unsafe notice still hung crooked by her front door. Smoke from her chimney rose thin but steady. "That oil was in your kitchen before she touched it," the miner said. Davy's pen trembled over the first blank line. "Abel in there?" he asked. Davy glanced at Hake. Hake answered, "Being used." The miner stared at him. "Is he breathing?" Hake's jaw tightened. "For now." That was the wrong answer. Even Hake heard it after he said it. The street held still. The tin tokens did not shine like food anymore. They looked like little plates nobody decent could lift. The miner stepped back from the crate. "I will see him before I sign." Hake reached for his sleeve. "You will sign before you take company charity." The miner pulled free, not violently, just enough. "Then keep the charity." For one breath no one moved. Hake still had the bell, the list, the sacks, the guards, and every account in the store. The miner had only empty hands and a hungry face. He crossed the street. No one cheered. No one made it brave by naming it. Bate opened the door when he reached the porch. He looked at the notice beside her shoulder. "You serving?" he asked. Bates' throat tightened. "If you came hungry and free." He took off his hat. "Hungry anyway, working on the rest." She let him in. That was the second break. The third came when Davy Pell set the pen down. Hake turned on him. "Pick it up." Davy looked at the list. His own name was at the top as witness. Below it the lines waited clean and empty. "No," he said. It was a small word. It shook him head to foot. Hake's face went white. "You are discharged." "Yes, sir." Davy stepped away from the crate, leaving the list untouched. The line of men wavered. Hake grabbed the bell and struck it again. "Company men eat company food. Anyone crossing that street is done at the store, done at the mine, done in Alder Spur." Bate came out onto her porch. Snow had begun to stick on the rail. The empty bracket hung above her. Across the street, Hake held the bell like proof that he still knew how to summon people. Bate did not raise her voice. She did not need the whole mountain. She needed the men in front of her to hear. "I will not ring that bell for you," she said. "Not from his hand, not from mine. Supper is on because people are hungry, not because iron tells them to obey." Hake laughed, but it came too sharp. "You cannot feed them." "No," Bates said, "not alone." Clara stepped onto the porch beside her. Her apron was smoke-stained. "I brought beans." The miner who had crossed first called from inside. "I can split wood after I eat." Another man near the crate took off his cap. "My wife has potatoes." "Mine has coffee," said another. Hake slammed the bell down on the crate. "Any goods brought to that house will be charged against wages." Rowan moved then. He did not step in front of Bate. He did not touch Hake. He led his mule team into the middle of the street and stopped them between the company store and the mine road. 6 mules, broad rumps, loaded harness, patient as judgment. Hake stared. "Move that team." Rowan kept one hand on the lead mule's cheek. "No. I will have those animals seized for debt. Try before witnesses. You think they will stand for you?" Rowan looked at the men, not asking, not pleading. "I think I am tired of making fear easy to haul." The sentence landed harder than if he had shouted. He risked the only wealth he had, the team, the route, the work his brother had helped him build before the mine took him. Hake pointed to 2 guards by the store. "Clear the street." The guards hesitated. One of them had been coughing in Bates' kitchen an hour before with broth in his hands. Hake saw the hesitation and made his last mistake. "Your credit is mine too," he snapped. "Every boot, every blanket, every bean. Move them or sleep hungry." The guard took off his company armband and dropped it on the crate beside the bell. The sound was softer than iron. It mattered more. Hake looked at the strip of cloth as if it had spoken out of turn. "I already ate," he said. The line broke after that, not like a flood but like men remembering their legs. One crossed, then 3, then 5. Some carried nothing but bowls. Some carried potatoes from coat pockets, a twist of coffee, a strip of bacon, a heel of bread saved from noon. A woman came from the cabins with a crock covered in cloth. Another brought onions in her apron. They did not cheer Bate. They did not curse Hake. They did something worse for him. They stopped needing his permission. Hake grabbed the ration list and thrust it at Davy. "Write their names, everyone." Davy stood in the snow with empty hands. "Write them yourself." Hake looked around for someone else to command. His eyes landed on Clara. "You will be out of those rooms by morning," he said. Clara's face went pale. She had 2 rented rooms over the wash shed. Losing them meant sleeping wherever mercy could be found. Bate turned to her. "Clara, you do not have to stand here." Clara looked at the bell on the crate, then at Bate's burned hand, then at the men carrying food through the snow. "No," she said. "I think I do." She stepped down, crossed the street, and took her blue coffee cup from the pantry cloth Bate had wrapped it in. Bate had not seen her go for it. Clara carried it to the crate and set it beside the dropped armband. "I will not drink at a store that buys my silence," Clara said. It was not a confession. It was a cost made visible. Her rooms, her tubs, and Bates' easy trust were gone. What remained was harder and cleaner. Hake swept the cup from the crate. It hit the snow and cracked. Bate flinched. Clara did not. "Good," she said quietly. "Now I will not mistake it for whole." Hake lifted the bell again, but no one moved toward him. He struck it once. The sound went out over a street where people were walking the other way. At Bates' porch, men waited with bowls in their hands. Women set food on the sideboard. Rowan's mules stood in the street, blocking no one who wanted to pass, but making Hake walk around them if he wanted to reach Bates' door. Bate looked at the room behind her. It was crowded, smoky, short on chairs, and loud with coughing. It was not victory the way songs like to dress it. It was work. It was hunger divided into portions and fear divided until it could be carried. She lifted her burned hand and pointed at the tables. "No one eats standing if a chair can be found. No man takes 2 bowls until every person has one. Anyone with potatoes puts them in the wash tub by the stove. Anyone with credit trouble says it after supper, not before." Clara, coffee week. Rowan, wood. Davy, if you are done being Hake's pen, wash your hands and carry plates. Davy blinked. "Yes, ma'am." Bate did not ring a bell. She did not need to. The supper was thin. There was no hiding it. Beans stretched with potatoes. Broth clouded with flour. Bread sliced so narrow a man could see lamplight through it. But every bowl passed from hand to hand before any second serving, and every person saw who made that possible. Hake stood across the street for a long time with the bell in his hand and sacks of company flour at his back. He still had the store. He still had the ledger. He still had the mine office until someone above him learned how badly he had spent obedience. But by the end of that supper, he did not have the camp's hunger trained the way he had that morning. Near midnight, when the last bowl had been scraped and the burned cook slept in the pantry under Bates' spare quilt, Hake came to the back door. Rowan was outside splitting wood by lantern light. He set the axe down when Hake approached, but he did not pick it up as a threat. Bate opened the door herself. Hake held out the supper bell. Snow melted along the brim of his hat. His red scarf was dark with wet. He looked smaller at the back door than he ever had on the store porch. "Take it," he said. Bate looked at the bell, the cracked lip, the black handle, the place where Davy's nervous hands had smudged soot into the iron. For 2 days she had wanted it back so badly she could feel the want in her burned palm. Now the bell looked like what it was: iron, useful if free, shameful if returned as favor. "Set it there," she said, pointing to the woodpile. Hake's mouth tightened. "I am giving it back." "No, you are returning what was not yours. Those are different acts." Rowan looked down, but she could tell he heard. Hake lowered the bell onto the woodpile. "This will not hold. By next week they will need credit." "Maybe. By spring they will forget tonight." Bate stepped onto the back threshold. The cold hit her wet apron and made her shiver. Some might. He seemed to take strength from that. Then she continued. But tomorrow morning they will remember where they ate without signing your list. That is enough for tomorrow. Hake looked past her into the kitchen. Clara washed bowls. Davy carried a stack of plates. Abel slept upright by the stove. Men who had once lowered their eyes now looked back at him, not boldly but directly. Hake made one last reach for command. Pike owes me $38. I can take the team. Rowan answered before Bate could. You can try at first light. I will have 6 men with paid freight receipts saying what those mules hauled before you ever opened a ledger. Receipts, Hake sneered. You have become fond of paper. No, Rowan said. I have become fond of not standing alone. From inside, Abel rasped, I will sign one. So will I, Davy said. Clara dried her hands. I cannot sign freight, but I can say when you threaten the tubs. Bate watched Hake count the room again and find the numbers changed. He turned away without taking the bell. No one followed him with a cheer. Bate was glad. Cheers would have made the night too simple. When the door closed, Clara picked up the cracked pieces of her coffee cup from the snow and brought them inside. I am sorry, she said. Bate looked at the broken cup in Clara's palm. I know. I do not ask you to trust me as before. Good, I cannot. Clara nodded. Pain crossed her face, but she did not ask Bate to soften it. Then tell me where to sleep after Hake puts me out. Bate looked at the dining room. Men lay across benches. The floor near the stove was already taken by 2 coughing miners. There was no spare room that did not cost someone comfort. Tonight, under the front table, Bate said. Tomorrow, we find you a wall that does not belong to him. Clara's eyes filled, but she only nodded and went to fold a flour sack for a pillow. Rowan came in last, carrying the bell. He had brushed snow from it. Where do you want it? He asked. Bate looked at the empty bracket through the front window. She thought of putting it back before dawn, high and visible, proof that Hake had failed. She thought of pulling the rope until the whole camp woke. She thought of sound rushing down the gulch the way it used to, telling men where supper waited. Then she looked at the room. No one there had come because iron called. They had come because a man crossed first, because a clerk put down a pen, because Clara chose cost over cover, because Rowan set his team in the street, because Bate opened the door without making obedience the price of bread. On the pantry shelf, she said. Rowan looked at her. Not back outside. Not yet, maybe not ever. He accepted that without argument, and set the bell on the shelf beside the flour tin. Bate unwrapped her burned hand. The skin was angry and blistered but not ruined. Rowan reached for a clean cloth, then stopped. May I? He asked. Bate held out her hand. He wrapped it carefully, tied the cloth lightly, and let go at once. You may lose the team, she said. I may. What then? Start smaller. She studied him, and after this settles. Rowan looked at the bell on the shelf. I would like to eat at whatever table you choose to keep, not because I hauled flour, because I would rather sit where you decide the rules. Warmth moved through her, cautious and tired. That is not tonight's answer, she said. I know. By morning, Hake had locked the company store for inventory. Inventory meant punishment with shelves. Men gathered in the street, cold and angry, but anger without breakfast could still turn on the nearest soft place. Bate did not give it time. She opened her front door before sunrise. The unsafe notice still hung there. She took it down, not by tearing, but by pulling the nail loose with the claw of Rowan's hammer. The paper came away whole. She carried it across the street and tucked it under the canvas covering Hake's untouched ration sacks. No speech. No crowd. Just the lie returned to the food it had been protecting. Davy Pell watched from the edge of the store porch and gave a tired laugh when Bate walked back without hurrying. By noon, the first freight receipt was signed at Bate's table by men who had hauled with Rowan and knew his team was his. The papers would not stop every trouble Hake could make, but they made seizure harder. They made lying more expensive. Clara found room over the old assay shed with a widow who needed washing done. It was colder than the wash rooms and farther from the pump. Clara accepted it. When Bate offered 2 blankets, Clara took one and refused the second. "Earn it later," Bate said. Clara shook her head. "No, I will borrow one and bring it back clean. I need to learn the difference." Bate let her have that sentence. The camp did not transform into a family by sunset. 3 men still signed Hake's ration list. 2 avoided Bate's eyes all week. The mine still belonged to owners far away, and Hake still had keys, sacks, and spite enough for 10 winters. But on the 3rd evening, a miner came to Bate's back step with a turnip. Then a teamster came with coffee. Then the burned company cook came, one arm bandaged, to ask whether he might peel potatoes for a bowl. Bate did not ring the bell. She left it on the pantry shelf. At 5 o'clock, she stood in the kitchen and listened. Boots sounded on the back step. 3 pairs, then 6, then an extra bench scraping from the shed. Clara told a man to wipe his feet. Davy laughed at something Abel said and coughed halfway through it. Rowan's mules stamped in the street outside, and Rowan waited by the door because this table was hers. Bate looked at the bell on the shelf, black and silent. Then she wiped her hands on her apron, opened the back door, let the sound of boots come in without being called, and sat down at her own table before she served a single bowl. For the first time in Alder Spur, supper began without permission.